Right. Good afternoon, everyone. For those that are listening to this afterwards, this is going to be a Q&A session and not new content, specifically because I know some students are rewriting their maths test, and our test is tomorrow, so I don't want to stress you out too much. And we'll do it next week. I want to do error handling when at least the normal amount of the usual amount of attendance is there. Okay, there's a question here that says, "Hi sir, I wanted to ask about the semester test. Some of us have load shedding and service is also down in areas, so I can't use a mobile data hotspot to download and upload the test. Is there an alternative option?" Now, unfortunately, for this specific test, the test is only 40 minutes. I think it's 40 minutes. Let's just check. You just double check on that. I'll share my screen. 50 minutes. The test is 15 minutes long. So with 15 minutes, you only have about an additional hour to upload. So that still leaves about 2 hours in the load shedding situation of you not being able to upload. So the problem is because of the length of the test, we can't extend the upload indefinitely. Otherwise, I would have gladly done that. But because of the test itself, we can't do that. Yeah, so the test is 15 minutes long and for 40 marks. And it's in 2020 or 2019. I need to change that. My load shedding is from 8 to 12. Yeah, that's still 2 hours after. Let's just see. It's still 2 hours after the load shedding, an hour and a half. Oh, wow, that's 4.5 hours. Oh, yeah, that's regular, I guess. Yeah, that's also true if it's on time. Look, ideally, you get automatic entrance to the SSA if you don't write the main paper. With the way the online things are done, you'll get automatic entrance into the SSA if you don't submit for the main paper. But I guess we'll talk to the HOD. We've got a meeting with the HOD. Well, Mr. Gotcha will be leaving soon to go to that meeting, but we've got a meeting with the HOD today. We'll maybe just double check with her how to handle it. And then I'll post it I'll post it on Eve, and we'll post it in the announcements text channel on Discord. So maybe just keep an eye there. But like I said, unfortunately, we can't extend the deadline for 2 hours. It's only an hour paper, so you're giving you 3-4 times the amount of time to write. Because if it's extended for one person, it needs to be extended for everybody. And unfortunately, we can't extend it for that much time. So yes, you've got 15 minutes to write. That's just the session in which it is. So your sessions are 45 minutes long, but you have 15 minutes to write the test, and then you'll have about an hour to upload the test afterwards. So yes, basically an hour and 15 minutes. But keep in mind that the session time is meant for submission, specifically for people that have low data connection areas, so they can upload. But I know most of you will probably use the extended time to still continue writing. Okay, so like I said, unfortunately, I don't think we can extend it indefinitely. We'll check with the HOD what we can do, but extending a 1 hour for another additional 2 hours of the submission time, or even 3 hours, because if lockdown ends, I mean, not lockdown, the load shedding ends on time, then you're kind of getting too much time to do this paper. So in that case, I would say you'll have to write the SSA, which is unfortunate. But like I said, just keep an eye on Eve. We'll put our final comments and final decisions there once we have spoken to the HOD. So you will start at 9:40. The paper will be uploaded at 9:40, probably be uploaded at 9:35. I normally upload it 5 minutes before the time. There will be a reading time allocated as well. So the actual start time will probably be at 9:50, just to give you a chance to download the paper. We call it reading time, but it's to give you an opportunity to download the paper, because if everybody accesses it at the same time on Eve, it tends to slow down slightly. And then we'll officially start at 9:50. Then you have 15 minutes to write, which means you'll have time to write until 10:40. And then from 10:40 until 11:40, you'll have submission time. So you'll see on Eve, when we upload the paper, it will be uploaded as a practical. You'll see that the submission time, or the deadline, will be the end of the submission time, which will be 11:40. So technically, you actually have about 2 hours. Yes, there will be an honesty declaration as well that I will be uploading to Now Ready, so you can submit that before you write the test, or you can submit that after you write the test. So the honesty declaration will be open until midnight tomorrow night. Please just note that if you submit your test to the honesty declaration spot, it will not be evaluated if it was submitted outside the allowance of the main test. I've had students try that before, so please be cautious of that. It's make sure you upload the correct things to the correct spots. Yes, we can. Which questions do you want to go through? You want to go through the entire thing, or just some of them? You need to be a bit more specific. Recursion and the programming part. Okay, so there is no programming part. You have to write the code. 3 and 4. So those are the UML and the coding parts. Okay, so Ms. Cottrell says the students that have load shedding, if you can't upload during the submission time, then unfortunately you'll have to write the SSA. So I suggest just check how much time you have or bandwidth you have during the load shedding and try and complete it then, otherwise you can write the SSA. So is there a possibility of going back to contact classes for this remaining months of 2020 academic year? To my knowledge, no. With things currently, I don't think we'll do contact classes this year in our department specifically. But like it's once we receive feedback from higher up, we will give you the official statements. But at this point, I don't think so. But like I said, it's based on what we are told. So currently, no. It is too risky. I mean, level 3 is, I think, 33% of campus attendance, and we have slightly larger classes as well. So you can't really social distance successfully in a class of 400 students, well, 300 students. I have a question. I hope it's not unrelated. How would you determine the days of the month as asked in Prac 06? Okay, so it's not unrelated, but it won't be in your semester. So there is a date function inside Visual Studios. So you can use the date function, and each month has the same amount of, well, each month has a static amount of days, except for February with the leap years. So you can kind of either calculate a leap year and then determine the days of the month, or you can just hard code the days of the month, because January will always have the number of days January has. So the number of days generally don't change. September always has 30 days. February is the only one that's a little bit tricky to handle. Right. So let's go over last year's past paper. I have a question with regards to interfaces. What are their roles? How are they significant? So we discussed interfaces in detail last week? No. Yesterday? No, on Monday. I discussed interfaces. I think it should still be on the recording. We're going to do an example of interfaces again next week, Tuesday. So just come to the chat next week, Tuesday, and then you'll see interfaces again. It's basically loosely coupled class relationships, which will allow you to do either multiple inheritance or have a checklist of things that need to be there. Okay. So for last year's paper, you had your general knowledge questions, which in this case is only going to be 5 questions, and they're going to be multiple choice questions. You've got your recursive question. Now for your recursive question, it's not going to be multiple choice. In this case, there is a multiple choice option. So you can choose one of the 5 options, whether the one is correct or not, and do a trace table, so you can prove that your answer is right. Now, in the semester test for tomorrow, you will only be given the code snippet itself, and you need to determine A, B, and C. Now, keep in mind that in terms of A, B, and C, your final result has to be a formula with the consideration of A, B, and C. So if you assume that C, if you make an assumption that C starts at 4, meaning that C equals 4, and you do your entire calculation, and you end off with a numerical value, that numerical value has to be written down in terms of C, because C is the only number or the only value or unknown that has a known value or assumed known value to do your calculation. So you want to go through this specific example in terms of the trace table, or do you want to rather go to question 3 and 4? Because I know there was questions about question 3 and 4. Is it possible for derived class to inherit from base class and implement from interface? That we did on Monday. I showed that exact example on Monday where the base class has an interface and then you inherit from that. But the biggest recommendation that of is it possible to do these things, go and try it out. You can still ask. I can demo them live as well. But go and test it out for yourself. Go and try and do what you're trying to find out whether it works or not. Because very easily you'll see that either VB's Visual Studio is going to complain about what you're trying to do, or you'll be able to do it. So if you're unsure about if something is going to work or not, test that out. And if it works and you don't know why, then come and ask me. Or if you want me to test it out live, you can ask it in the tutorials, because the tutorials I normally remain there for a lot longer. You can ask the students at the Tuesday evening tutorials. We tend to go over time most of the time. All right, so if we do our trace table, I just need to open up something I can draw in. Let's use Excel. If you do a table, you first make your assumption. So you have your formula, you have your base case, and you have your recursive call. Just make sure that you have those. Then what you want to do is you want to do a trace table for this example. Now, ideally, you don't want to do more than 3 or 4 steps. Otherwise, it gets you spend too much time on the question itself. So look at the base case and look where the base case ends. And in this case, the base case ends where C is less than 1. and C gets decreased by 1 value every time it gets executed. So go and test it out. We go and do the trace tables for about 4 steps, which in this case would be C is 3 or C is 4. So let's go with C equals 3, and then we've got our recursive call, which is return A plus B times cal question to C, and then the parameters in C being decreased by 1. So let's just move that over there. So you've got your return, which will be A plus B. You just attach numpad here. A plus B times cal question 2, and that would be AB C minus 1. Right. Just close this off. So we start off with 3, C being 3. So what you do is you put C 3 into the parameter list and you execute this function. Now, what's going to be the return of the value of 3? C being 3, what will be the return here? What's the return if C is 3? No, your return is A plus B times the function call of cal question 2 AB and 2. You have to write it out completely. You can't do it halfway. So your return is A plus B times calc and then the function call with C being decreased by 1. So now it's going to be 2. All right. Make sure you write it out completely. Don't just say bracket AB C minus 1 bracket. That it's not the function call. You have to write down the function name as well, or just the simple answer. You can choose any value. I choose 3 because it's less steps to get to the base case. So you always want to achieve or reach the base case, but you don't want to do more than 3 or 4 steps because then you're doing it unnecessarily. So do about 3 or 4 steps because it gives you enough time to establish a pattern, but it's not an absurd length in the pattern itself. So you don't calculate this endlessly to get to your final base case. Right. Now, what's your return of C being 2? So what I normally do in the trace table is I write down the return of the previous function, which is A plus B, times, and then now it's going to be the return of C being 2, which is going to be A plus B again, multiplied by the return of calc A, B, 1. All right. So I just build on the previous. So I take my return from the previous one. I pull the AB down, or I pull the first 2 values before the function call down, and then I just fill it in with the return of 2. Now you can do it that way, or you can do the specific returns for each one, and then just replace the calls at the end. I find this way to be easier at the end for most students. All right, C being 1, so it follows the same pattern. We fill in what we have for the previous ones. And now the return of C being 1. So you've got A plus B and then the function call again. Now C is 0. So C being 0, what is our return? We've got A plus B, so we pull down what we have previously. Multiplied by the return of our function call. Now what's the return of C being 0? 1. All right. So there we have our formula in terms of A, B, and C. So what did we do next? Next, we go and we calculate our formula. So we can go A plus B times A plus B times A plus B.
I didn't understand.
Go away, basically. A plus B. Do we need the times 1? Is that necessary? Why not? Why is it not necessary? Why is it redundant? That is correct. Any value times by 1 will be the value, and because everything in brackets is multiplied by the thing next to it, you can assume, well, you can know that anything, the result of any of these calculations multiplied by 1 will still be the values themselves. So you can just successfully work with A plus B times A plus B times A plus B. All right. So let's make this formula a bit simple, because now we see a lot of the same values here. So let's make it a bit simpler for ourselves, or a bit more compact. What can we break this down to? A plus B to the power of, no, before we do so, it's A plus B to the power of 3. Can you all see that? All right. So it doesn't look like anybody's disputing that. All right. Now, you've got a simple formula. You've got A plus B to the power of 3. Now, remember we started with the assumption C is equal to 3. We ended off with a 3, so you can say that is A plus B to the power of C. Because if you increase this, if you make C 4, you're adding an additional plus B, which means you'll end with A plus B to the power of 4, which is still equivalent to C, your starting point. Remember, C, your starting point specifically. So you've got A plus B to the power of C, and with our options, we can see option B, we have A plus B to the power of C. Now, just because we end off with a numerical value that's equivalent to C, it is convenient in this case. If you end with, just an example, I'm going to remove these just in case someone gets confused. So this is going to be a completely unrelated example. So let's say we end with something like this. We've got A times B 4 times. Now, can we still say A times B to the power of 4? This is still true, because we've got A times B to the power of 4. That is still true. But now, C, we assume C is equal to 3, which means if we need to write this down in terms of C, it's going to be C minus 1. So you've got 8B to the power of C plus 1. right, my mind's not good today. Because you need to write it down in terms of A, B, and C, and you have a finite number for C or an assumed number for C. So if you end with a numerical value, you can calculate that numerical value based on C, and that's what you want to do. So any numerical you end with, you calculate in terms of C. All right, so let's take this back, and we make, you want to see if the return was 2, what the answer would be. So in this case, if your return was 2, what would you do? And you do that. Well, it's essentially that. You still have the correct value there. So you can still go a plus b to the power of 3, and then that you can just get a 2 on the front or the back, depending on how you want to add it. But now you've got a numerical value. So you've got a plus b to the power of c, and in front you have the numerical value, which you can write in terms of c by saying c minus 1. So that would be your resulting answer. You don't have to do every step. You can do all the, so when you do the trace table, you can do it until the last value. And from the last value, you should be able to see what the formula is going to be. So you don't have to actually go and break it down step by step. I'm just doing it step by step for the students that have an easier way of seeing it if we do it that way. But if you can see the answer from your trace table, then you can go and write down the formula directly. Keep in mind that you will need to do a trace table because that's where most of your marks are going to come from. You get a mark for your value. You get a mark for your successful call, essentially. So you can do it once or twice. And then you get a mark for the correct values for A, B, and C at the end. Now, each formula has its own addition. So you'll normally check the regular or the recursive call itself. You'll check the base call itself, and then you'll check the final answer, which returns the base call, and then you'll check the formula being presented. Those are the things that are important. It does not matter which value you choose for C. That's why I say when you go and choose a value for C, go and look at your base case, because your base case is going to tell you where you're going to stop. And then choose 3 or 4 steps before that. I would say about 3 steps, 3 to 4 steps, but no more than that. So if you see the base case ends with C being less than 1, so it's going to end with C equals to 0, because C gets decreased by 1 every time. Then go and choose C equals to 3 or equals to 4. Your final formula will still be the same, should still be the same. If you do it twice with different values for C and you see your final formula is different, then you probably made a mistake in your formula, or the function cannot be written down in terms of a specific formula itself. There is a case like that, but I'm not going to show you that to you today. I think we did show it to you when we did the original trace tables. So there is a function formula that you can't really write down in terms of A, B, and C. Well, if C is going to be more than 1, then we'll probably start off with a negative value. Remember, C is just kind of a counter here. You're just repeating this function call multiple times, and base case is going to make a difference in the recursion. So you're always going to have that first part that's going to be repeating itself until you reach the base case, and the base case is going to be added onto that end of the recursive call. So whether it is C larger than 1 or C less than 1, you still choose a value that will do a few steps. Because if you do C larger than 1, you're not going to start with 2, because then you're going to get your base case immediately. You'll then probably start with C being -2 or C being -3. All right. So don't confuse yourself with the what is the actual base case, the condition. Look at what the base case result is, and then write it down for 3 steps that will reach the base case. Then you'll see you've got a duplicated value in the first part. That will definitely be duplicated. And then you've got your final base case return, which will be added to it. So it's either going to be a multiply, divide, addition, or subtraction of whatever is returned by your base case. The final result for this question was a plus b to the power of c. So that was the correct answer. All right. So don't be confused by it. If you want to see a few examples of this, Mr. Cottrell did a few examples and I did a few examples yesterday. So I think we did about 3 examples each. If you're still unsure about how to write it down specifically, maybe watch Mr. Cottrell's one first. If you're going to watch mine, just skip the first one. It might slightly confuse you there with the first one, but the rest are fine. Now, before we end, because I see we're almost at the end of our time, let's talk about the programming question 3. So in question 3, you'll be given a code snippet. The code snippet itself is important. There might be some additional context given to you, but the code snippet is code being provided, and then you're asked questions to add to that code. So in this case, for question 3.1, you are asked to declare a double variable called average lines of code, and then you are asked to make it accessible by any derived or inherited class in the hierarchy, which indicates that it needs to be a protected. Yes, that is correct. Then you've got a utility function that you have to write. So it's just a function that takes in an integer value, determines if it is a negative, and then returns 0 if it's a negative, or just return the value if it's not negative. So yes, it's an if statement. If given value is less than 0, return 0. Else you just return the value that was given to you. Yes, you can name it anything. It doesn't say here what you should name it. The ideal naming would be validation, but it doesn't matter what you name it, as long as you have the correct computational code inside. Now keep in mind that this is a written test. We expect you to give us a written code for this, as if you were on campus, you would write it out by hand. You've got the benefit of doing it in VB, but just make sure you copy it over to Word or whatever you submit with. Just copy it into that if you're going to do it in VB. Don't leave it. Don't submit your VB solution. Submit it in the document that you're going to submit to us. Yes, the point is to validate. And you write code. Yes, you can type it up. These functions are generally very easy, so it's not very hard. Now for 3.3, provide an appropriate property method for the instance variable and underscore line of code. Note that any input must be validated to ensure values are not negative. So in this case, you need to write your property method, which is your get and your set, and you need to make sure that the given value is not negative. So you can either use the utility function you just wrote, or you can just do the if statement validation inside the property method itself. So you can do it either way. The mark allocation accommodates both scenarios. Then question 3.4, define a constructor that accepts a single integer parameter that is used to ensure that the instance variable line of code is correctly allocated in memory. Yes. With other words, you want to create a constructor that basically just redims the line of code. So you're going to have one computational line of code inside that function, that constructor. Then lastly, provide the code to call the method clear code. So you can see you've got clear code inside your IT program class. So you just want to provide the code to call that. So you can call mycode.cleanCode. So nothing too tricky there. So the marks for 3.4 is allocated to the parameter. So it's the keyword for your constructor, because you have to have a public new, your parameter list, the data type, and then the computational line of code inside as well. So can we use subroutines for validation and pass the argument by reference? Why would you want to do that? Are you talking about 3.2? 3.2 says you have to define a utility function, not a utility subroutine. Be very careful. If the question asks for a function, you must write a function. If the question asks you for a subroutine, you must write a subroutine. So just read that very carefully. If we don't define what you have to use, then you can use whatever you want as long as it is correct. But if we specify in the question you have to use a function, then you have to use a function. And most of the times, we will probably give you at least one utility function to do, because you can use that in a question later in that set, or you can just rewrite the actual validation itself. If memory serves right, it's question 3 and 4. We increase the weighting of both of them. I think question 3 counts more. I think question 3 is about 17 marks. And question 4 was about 15 marks, I think, or 12 marks. 12 marks. Because we took question 1 and we made question 1 count only 5 marks. So we took the 5 marks and we divided it up between question 3 and question 4. So 3 and 4 is going to count the most. Now for question 4, UML, you'll be given an image and you'll be given a small intro explaining what's going on there. And you're basically just required to design a UML for a scenario being provided, or a scenario you have to provide. So in this case, you have to define a C creature class, give it at least 2 attributes and 1 appropriate method. This is a method of your choice, but this excludes constructor and property methods. You do not need to add the constructors or the property methods. Now, in this question, this is your base class essentially. Then you've got defined 2 additional classes, which both inherit directly from C creature. They must each have 2 attributes and 1 appropriate method, keeping in mind that the constructor and property methods and overridden methods do not count for this specific example. So each one of these classes have to have 2 attributes and 1 appropriate property method. 1 appropriate method of your choice. It doesn't define what that method has to do, as long as it is relevant towards the example or the scenario. And then you've got a mark just for your UML. And it's really not that bad. The test is quite easy. So That's all you have to do for this test. That's why the test is so short. The test is only 15 minutes. Give us an example of that question, sir. Well, here's one in front of you. Consider a class called sea creatures will be used in an aquarium like Ushaka Marine World in Durban. If you want another example, your practical question for this week is an example of something like this. The test is 50 minutes, not 15 minutes. Question 4 is UML, yes. Like I meant classes names. Oh, okay. So the base class is given to you. It's called sea creatures over here. So you can have derived classes. So if we look at it, consider a class called sea creatures, which will be used in an aquarium like Ushaka Marine World in Durban to manage their attractions. So you've got sea creatures. So you can potentially go sharks on the one side, you can go tropical fish, you can go dolphins, you can go seals. All of those are sea creatures. Go turtles or tortoises. I think tortoise is the one that's in the sea. An attribute you can go for tortoise, you can go the size of its shell, you can go age. Dolphins, you can probably go dorsal fin size, age, color. As long as the attributes just kind of match what the class itself is, it's like a characteristic of the class. Seals, you can go attribute taught or can do tricks, anything like that. It's anything you choose as long as it is logical. As long as it makes sense, it doesn't matter. With the additional attributes, just make sure you don't merge or duplicate your attributes themselves. So if the one is a name, don't use name again. Simple as that. If you go sea creatures, you can go name and age. Then you can go tortoise as the one derived, and tortoise is water temperature and shell size or shell strength or has shell. You can go bred in captivity as a boolean. There's a lot of things you can use. It just depends on how you are going to approach the question itself. That's why I said it's beneficial for you to look at your practical for this week, because it will give you the idea of you need to come up with the idea. That's why I gave you that practical. It kind of is a demo of what we expect from you for the semester test. It's something you're going to have to think of. You're given an example, you're given a scenario, now you have to think of it for yourself. Well, if you make Ushaka a derived class, what is it inheriting from sea creatures? Just keep in mind, you have to inherit from sea creature. It's also why I say read the question through first before answering. Because you'll see here, you need to define the sea creature, and you'll also see that you need to inherit from sea creature. It might change how you consider the attributes and the methods in sea creature itself. I'm concerned about that statement of copy and paste to Word. Why not just do everything in Word from the start? I would just do the test in Word. It's the easiest way. When we are writing, sir. Yes, you can do it in Word from the start. Or are you referring to coding it out in VB and then copying your VB code into Word? Yes, nothing stops you from doing that. Yes, you can write on paper and use CamScanner. Keep in mind that this is a written test. It's meant to be written on paper. So your submission is meant to be a single Word or a single PDF document. You can write the entire paper or the entire question paper on paper and use your phone to CamScan every question or every paper and submit that if you want to. The test is going to start at 9:40, or the paper is going to be released at 9:40. Yeah, not that one. The paper is going to be released at 9:40. It will probably be available 5 minutes before the time, and then we'll probably only start the official timer at 9:50. But just look on Eve when you download the paper. The deadline is there. It tells you what is the last opportunity you have to submit that paper, which will probably be 10. No, it will be 11:40. Because we give you 10 minutes to download the paper, you have 15 minutes to write the paper, and then you have an hour to submit the paper at the end. And you'll see when you go through the paper, you don't need that much time. If you read the questions through properly once, and you answer the questions, and just read through your questions again, you should be able to finish this easily in 40 minutes. So it's going to be under practicals. It will be uploaded as a practical. So you'll see the name will be Semester Test 1. So it will be under the practical tab. So we will be releasing, Mr. Cottrell and myself, we're just finishing off the guidelines. We'll be releasing the guidelines after our meeting that I'll be heading off to now. So just have a look on Eve. It will be up by 5 this afternoon. It's just some guidelines on what we expect in the test. So what tools you can use, how you can upload, what you can use for your upload, where to find the paper. It will be in the guideline. And there's also we're setting up a Discord server for the test itself. Just want to see if any student, okay, it's just me and Mr. Cottrell. So we'll be releasing that link as well tomorrow morning or in the guidelines. So that is for anything you have. If you have any questions during the semester test, you can ask it in that specific Discord server. So it's there to basically have a dedicated channel for communication directly with me and Mr. Cottrell during your test. All right. If you finish the paper in 30 minutes and CamScan your answers and upload around that time, is it fine? What do you mean upload around that time? Within 30 minutes? Look, you have until we release the paper and until the submission closes to upload that paper. So we don't care where you submit within that time, as long as you submit within that time. It's like a regular test. And the benefit here is you don't have to sit for the first 30 minutes. It's when you're done, you can upload and continue working on your practical or studying for your other subjects. Okay, I unfortunately do have a meeting I have to go to now, so we are already over time here. This is not the real paper. Okay, but I hope you guys are prepared. It's not going to be difficult, and best of luck.